Former Deputy Senate President Ekweremade and his wife Beatrice have both been convicted of organ trafficking in the United Kingdom.
Ekweremade, a former Nigerian Deputy Senate President, with his wife, alongside their doctor Olarinoye, were found guilty of violating the Modern Slavery Act. The trio were found guilty after a 6-week trial of facilitating the travel of a young man to Britain with a view to exploiting him. The Metropolitan Police had in June 2022 remanded in custody and arraigned Beatrice and Ekweremade at the Oxbridge Magistrates Court. Meanwhile, the Judge Justice Jeremy Johnson will pass a sentence at a later date. Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye has a background.
It's been a long 6 weeks for the family. That is, of course, Mr. Ekweremade, his wife Beatrice, and this third person, what the British courts are describing as a medical middleman who essentially facilitated this organ trafficking, the facilitation of a young boy from Nigeria to the UK for his organ to be harvested. He is Dr. Olarinoye and is said to be a family friend to the Ekweremades. Of course, the fourth person that was on trial was also daughter Sonia Ekweremade, 25-year-old promising student who is at the center of this case. She, of course, was cleared of all charges, but the other three, who are being described as a trio, have all been charged with organ trafficking. Like you rightly pointed out there, the first defendants ever to be found guilty under the UK's Modern Day Slavery Act. Now, if we cast our mind back to last year, sometime in May, June, the former Deputy Senate President was accosted at London Heathrow, where he was accused of facilitating the movement of one person, this young man who can't be named for legal reasons, to the UK for his organ to be harvested for his dying daughter. Of course, his wife was said to be an accomplice, and they were both arraigned at the time. Since then, his wife Beatrice has been on bail, and of course, Mr. Ekweremade, who stayed in detention. Now, it's been a very tumultuous case for the family, considering the technicalities of it. Modern Day Slavery Act is a very recent act in the UK, and of course, this is why they're the first people to be detained. Based on legal kind of history and legal acts in the UK, anything to do with Modern Day Slavery Act or human trafficking per se can face anything up to 14 years imprisonment. So far, there are a lot of complications around this case, considering they aren't been found guilty of human trafficking. They've been found guilty of organ trafficking. And I've spoken to several lawyers who have told me that actually their case falls more into the Organ Tissue Act, which is where somebody's organ is, of course, harvested, which is what they've actually been found guilty for. That sentencing could be far different. They could face anywhere from 12 months to 3 years. And of course, we know that Mr. Ekweremade has spent nearly a year in detention, but we won't know the exact sentence until the 5th of May. But whichever way it goes, it will be something quite lengthy.
Well, Arise analyst Frank Tietie now joins us to take a look at some of these issues. First of all, you have to establish, this is quite strange to many Nigerians, Modern Slavery Act. I think is a better place for us to start off.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that strange because we have certain laws in Nigeria, whether it's the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015 and then the NAPTIP Act of 2015 as amended. These laws also criminalized all forms of trafficking for whatever purpose, in this case especially for the purpose of exploiting an individual in terms of taking organs for whatever reason, whether for transplant or for sale. So these are the same standards we have in Nigeria. While this is coming in this manner, it's because of the high-profile nature of the personality, and then to also think about the African empathy that is spread across this, thinking that these are parents who are trying to save their daughter. Of course, and unfortunately, the British court did not see that as any point in any way to mitigate the accusations against them.
Yeah, and the young man in question actually claims that he did not know why he was taken to Britain in the first place. Let's talk about the technicalities that may have contributed to this judgment.
Well, Ekweremade is just a victim of a somewhat nearly poor legal advice and a refusal of his home country, Nigeria, to offer him any serious assistance. If you look at the provisions of the Modern Slavery Act, particularly Section 2, which is instructive to his conviction, it's crafted in such a manner that no one and anybody who has been accused of being part of a human trafficking for the purpose of exploitation of organs can hardly escape. And now, if the lawyers realize that so quickly, they ought to have gone into certain arrangements that would have mitigated the kind of possible punishment Ekweremade will face. Ekweremade, yes, is likely, if he were to be convicted, if he's convicted, I haven't seen the judgment, but from the reports that I've read, if he's going to be sentenced based on the provisions of the Modern Slavery Act, it is likely to go for life imprisonment, except
life.
Yes, except because Section 2 of the law provides that irrespective of consent of the person involved, or irrespective of the age of the person, because if you look at the time Ekweremade was arrested, the brouhaha on the social media was that, oh, but the guys first claimed he was a teenager, and then that's the reason why the UK authorities moved against Ekweremade. It was immaterial, and it doesn't matter if the man even willingly consented. The way many Nigerians at that time were, at the time Ekweremade was arrested, they were willing, they were shouting all over the place that please, Ekweremade, they were ready to offer themselves free of charge. But we are dealing with a country that has a burden of hundreds of years of slavery that is trying to shake off, and is now using Ekweremade as a scapegoat to say that to compensate for the past guilt that it has had. So Ekweremade should know, and his lawyers should have known that there is no way he would have escaped from this. And then he should have immediately started negotiation. The way we call it in Nigeria.
The prosecutor actually made a point, said the behavior of Ekweremade, a successful lawyer and founder of an anti-poverty charity who helped draw up Nigeria's laws against organ trafficking, showed entitlement, dishonesty, and hypocrisy.
Ekweremade was faced with serious unfortunate times. His country was against him. There was the judge referred to the fact that there was nobody, even from his own family, that was willing to donate organ for his child. And then, on top of that, he was totally abandoned by his government. Yeah. Because in trying to do a desktop search in build up to this conversation, I realized that Zainab Aliyu, a Nigerian female student, was once arrested in Saudi Arabia for possessing drugs. And the offense for possessing such hard drugs in Saudi Arabia is death, is a death sentence. But we also saw the spirited efforts that the Nigerian government put in. The president came into it, they ordered the Attorney General to investigate. And somehow, miraculously, the Nigerian Diaspora Commission did all it could do, and then the young woman was freed. So, but in Ekwerimade's case, we saw a country that was virtually happy that Ekweremade was arrested. They made representations to the UK court that the man should not be granted bail. And on top of that, his own government initiated proceedings to seize his property back home, knowing that he could not brief a lawyer, knowing that he was in detention. The debacle, the Ekweremade saga should not befall anybody. A situation where he was at the top of his career, only for things to move against him. And again, he was forgetting that even though he put up a very lame defense, which ought not to be, I maintain with all humility that his lawyers ought to have seen this coming, that it probably was, we discussed whether he was led on. He wasn't led on, because the letters he wrote prior to facilitating the journey of this young man to the United Kingdom were leaked. So intelligence had it, they were preparing, they were waiting for him. And the doctors who actually reported him only cleaned up themselves, because they would have also been roped in, because the UK authorities were on top top of the matter, they needed to showcase Ekweremade to the world. But again, if you look at the provisions of certain laws we have, and if you have a flip side, and if this was happening to the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, what would happen? So when you look at the mutual legal assistance agreements that we've had with the United Kingdom, particularly the recent Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Act of 2016 that we had, how come that we have NAPTIP Act, we have the Violence Against Persons Act, which are laws which criminalize the same act which Ekweremade is said to have been convicted for now. One would have thought that the Senate President, Ekweremade was a seventh senator, and in Nigeria, let us forget about whether it was a seventh senator, they ought to have requested, because the British authorities, I know them, would not allow a deputy British Prime Minister to be tried for such an offense if it ever happened. They will put pressure on us, on the Attorney General. They will say they will wish that the British national be tried in British courts and then be punished in British prisons. Why didn't it happen in our case? We have a culture of abandoning our own. If it happened under the all for one and one for all Senate of David Mark, he would do everything possible to ensure that there was pressure on the authorities. Unfortunately, it's happening to an Ekweremade who is not popular and who is not well liked, even by his own people and his country.
There's a matter of law. We must also appreciate the fact that someone has flouted the laws of another country, and whether we like it or not, well, justice has been served in this case. If he's going to appeal, that's the next question. Are there appeal to this particular section of this act in the UK?
Certainly, the appeal process will be activated if the lawyers consider it necessary. But again, the pronouncement of the judge of the court, it takes immediate effect, so he proceeds immediately to prison and without. But you see, interestingly, it doesn't give the option of fine. There would have been an option of fine if the procedure adopted initially was negotiated. If it was just a summary trial procedure, whereby if he had pleaded guilty and said there were certain mistakes, there was certain misunderstanding, he didn't know what was involved. But for his lawyers to put up a show of defense, to now waste. Take the public time and waste public resources for weeks, and then to come up with an indictable conviction, it's going to be very difficult for Ekweremade.
Just like you said, maybe he's being scapegoated, if there's any such word. I mean, it's the first verdict of its kind under the Modern Slavery Act. Thank you very much, Frank Tietie, Rise News analyst, and of course...